a big question I get is, do we see our loved ones? Yes. Oh my gosh, there's like a party, there's a celebration. You're going to see everybody that you ever knew in this life and past lives. It's the coolest thing. Don't focus so much on the worldly stuff because it's gone when you take your last breath, and you will wish you would have spent more time tuning into your soul. However, that works for you. It doesn't have to be meditation. For some people, it's getting out in nature, it's walking, it's hiking, it's surfing, it's cycling. Like there's ways that people come into bliss, and it doesn't have to be sitting quietly in a room.
I am so blessed to have Mariko Frederick with me today on the show. Mariko had a near death experience that she wanted to come and share with us today. Mariko, thank you so much for being my guest. You had a near death experience and experienced something like never before. Tell us, how did you almost die?
So it was a while ago. I was 29 when I died, and I was living a really good life. I mean, my life was pretty good. I was an avid rock climber. I was living in the mountains. I had a practice in alternative medicine. Like things were good. And I ended up, well, two things happened. One, I got bit by a tick going hiking, and I ended up contracting Lyme disease. And I didn't know that. And that's not how I died. But I was sick. And I went to somebody practicing alternative medicine to help me because I felt awful. I had neck pain, I had shoulder pain. I was exhausted all the time, which was weird. And because I was still in my 20s, basically, I don't get into the details because it triggers people. And I'm a big advocate for alternative medicine. But this person was using equipment that you have to be a doctor to use, an alternative doctor. And she was ordering it through somebody who had the equipment and who had a license. And this person did not and had never been to school. And so they injured me to the point of a near death experience. And what they used would normally be safe had you gone to school and knew what you were doing and had a license, right? So that caused a very big problem in my body. I ended up having an NDE. And I think it took a long time to heal because I also had Lyme disease and nobody knew that. So that kept getting worse. So it was like a 10-year journey to get my health back, which was hard because when I had this NDE, they sent me back with something that I was here to do, and yet I couldn't do it. So that was really hard. But I guess you want to know about the NDE too. So when I died, I wasn't, so I've had things happen, right? Like I've had my appendix out. I've had health issues where I'm like, oh, I got to go. Like something's wrong. I go to the doctor. And before I went into alternative medicine, I worked in a trauma intensive care. So I was pretty aware of my body and what can happen, right? But this thing that happened, it kind of threw me. So I just felt off. I don't even know how to explain it because it wasn't like I could say, oh, I hurt here, right? Like with when the appendix coming out, I was like, ow, something's wrong. Got to go to the hospital. I think something's wrong. It wasn't like that. It was like everywhere felt off. So I went to lie down. I was tired, and I lied down and I just got extra tired, like more tired than I've ever been in my life. And I told my husband, he was home when it happened, and I was an herbalist at the time. And I told him like maybe some Chinese herbs. So I told him what to put together. It was loose teas, loose herbs that at the time I was using, and put those together and it'll tonify my energy. I'll feel better. Right. I think also like having a Western background, I think techs, nurses, doctors were all like in denial. Like, I don't need to go to the doctor. Like that tends to be kind of a theme. So I was like, oh, I'm fine. So I lie down and I start feeling like there's this weight on my chest, like an iron weight just sitting on me. And breathing got really hard. And I felt like I was just pushing this weight up and letting it fall, pushing it up and letting it fall. And again, like breathing was so hard. And at one point I had this thought, I think I'll stop. I think I'll let it fall. So I did. And when I did that, I knew that that meant that I was not going to breathe anymore and that that meant I would technically die. At the same time, I was like, no, I'm not dying. Everything's fine. And in that moment, I remember eventually I heard my last heartbeat. And then there was this buzzing sound followed that eventually went away right after my heart stopped. And I kind of equate it to like, I wonder if it was my nervous system, like that we could hear it when we leave. I don't know. But it got very quiet. And then this light was shining at me. It was like having 1,000 suns shining at my forehead, at my spiritual eye. And it was the most beautiful golden white light. I remember feeling like the pain had gone away. I'm kind of, it's a lot to share in one time, in one conversation, but as I stopped taking my breath and my heart stopped, I remember also feeling like all the energy drained out of my body, like you would drain water from a pool. It was just like all gone. And there was no pain. There was, in fact, the pain was gone because I was in pain and it hurt to breathe. And I remember just feeling it. I think my personality was still there because my first thought, which is a little funny, but I was like, wow, it's so much better. Breathing's so overrated. It's funny we think we have to do it. I was like feeling surrounded by light. So there's nothing to be afraid of, even though I knew this meant that I wasn't going to be in my body anymore. And so I remember after that, I was like above my body, like floating. And I remember saying goodbye to my loved ones, just sending gratitude and love and saying goodbye to my husband, to my sister, my parents, my friends, and just kind of saying a goodbye. But it wasn't like sad. Even though I was only 29, it felt like, I'll see you later. I'm just going to go step on the other side of this veil. And there's such an awareness that we're not leaving anybody. Like there's such a deep truth that there is no death and we're not leaving. So I wasn't sad personally. So I explain. It's funny. I say things that are very human. Like I went here, I saw this, but there's no physical body. But I did. It felt like I went through to the other side of this veil. And from there, that's when my life review began. And I had no ideas of NDEs. I'd never heard or read about people's experiences. It wasn't as out there as it is now. People weren't doing podcasts and talking about it back then. I knew people had because I'd worked in an intensive care. So I had seen people die and come back and have like experiences, but I'd never read about them. There were no podcasts. So this was all new to me in some ways, aside from being on the nursing side of seeing somebody come back. This was new. You're just in what I call the void because there's no light, but it's not missing light. Like it's not scary. It's not dark either. It is dark. It is black, but a single ray of light would have been like a foreign object. So when I say dark, I think we think dark, bad, something like that. It was just a void. I almost consider it like in between realms. And there was a being there waiting for me. And it wasn't a family member. It was somebody whose job it was to help me through this process. And so we started on my life review and I got to see all of these moments that mattered, the moments of decision and interaction, moments where I was really came down to moments where I was aligned with my soul and my heart and moments that I was not. And I was in my ego and I got to experience all of it from my perspective and the other person's perspective and divine God's perspective all at once. So there was zero judgment. So there's really nothing to be afraid of. The only judgment came from me of like, oh God, don't do that. Like you're watching yourself and you're like, don't do that. But so you feel the judgment, the regret of like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? And you're seeing all these moments. You're also seeing all the good moments. I think because we're human, we tend to focus on the negative. And so when I came back, I can't tell you every good moment that I had, but I remember the bad one. I was a little girl in kindergarten. And, they don't show you every time you like brushed your teeth and tied your shoes. It's not a whole life review. It's like the moments, like I said, of decision and interaction. In this moment, I was choosing to not be kind. I was choosing to test my power, my ego, how I can hurt somebody. And so I was being mean to a friend and I almost got her crying and I was saying mean things. There was some footprints, dog prints, and she was laughing at these dog prints. And I decided to be mean. My little 4-year-old self was like, oh my gosh, why are you laughing? That dog is dead. And the people that own the dog are so sad. And she was like, oh, I have no idea if the dog was dead. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I was being mean. And I said, well, how would you like it if you died and everybody laughed at you? And so she's like, almost started crying. And I only stopped because she was crying and I didn't want to get in trouble. So I am all ego, right? I'm like practicing my ego, not a proud moment for me. I think we all do that though, right? We all have moments where we're like, oh, what was I thinking? And I think it's interesting that when I came back with the memory that was most profound was when I was little. And I think the fact is we're learning. So I had that experience of experiencing it myself, watching it from her perspective as if I was her, feeling what she's feeling, looking at me. And then also experiencing it from the point of view of the creator or God, of unconditional love, zero judgment. So I got to experience that and see that, we are accountable. And the cool thing is, and I don't get to share this a lot because I forget, but I'm remembering today. The interesting thing is, this was in kindergarten. So I was 4 or 5 years old because I started when I was 4, and same age for her. Years later, I told you I used to work in intensive care. The universe does not miss anything. So here I screwed up, right? Yes, I was 4, and yes, I was testing, and I was whatever. I'm still accountable. So years later, I'm working in the neurotrauma intensive care, and I was a tech, an ICU tech. And I went out to go tell a patient's family that this patient had been admitted, right? I go into the waiting room, and there she is, years later. And I stopped and I saw her and her mom, and I was like, the whole family, they're worried this person had been into an accident, bad accident. And it was like, this is my chance. This is the moment the universe, and I wasn't like super spiritual, I hadn't come into all that yet. I think I always was because I remember between lives, but not like I am today where I'm more practiced about it. But I just knew, oh my gosh, this is my chance to make up to her what I did when we were 4. And so nurses might not be there for like 5-10 minutes, kind of saying like, hey, we'll call you in and we're going to get things ready. I was there for an hour, just pouring into them any questions they had. I remember I worked for the next 3 days because we had like 12-hour shifts. I was on for 3, and like every day I would make sure I got to take care of that person and like pour into the family. I made sure everybody in the unit knew that, hey, this is my friend, VIP. Like, not that there's VIP, but it's like, hey, this is my friend's family. Be extra nice or whatever, be extra accommodating, and it just felt really good. It feels really good to share that because I think we all have these moments where we're like having a bonehead moment. We're having a moment where we wish we could take it back, but the universe sees that, and you probably do get a chance to do that in some way. Maybe not with the same person, but in some way. So that was a really profound experience. And so I think that's why I brought that back. So after that, I remember feeling there was this light in front of me, a tunnel, but it wasn't like a tunnel like this. It was a tunnel like lying flat. There is no ground. I'm not standing anywhere because I'm not in a human body, but I don't know how to express it otherwise. But there was a light, like a disc, a large disc, and there was a silhouette slowly moving down over it. And so I asked this being, who is that? And the being answered, it's the part of you that gets attached. And so just in the silence, we watched the silhouette move through and into the light until it disappeared. And then at that point, I had this, it was like moving on to the next experience. And I was with these 4 souls, these 4 ascended masters. I don't even know what to call them because it's so high. We don't have a word for it. People have said, is it your spirit guides? I'm like, no, much higher. These ascended masters. And there was 4 of them, and they just blasted me with so much love and bliss and joy. It was like my human body would have exploded, right? We can't take it. That we're so loved. We're so loved unconditionally. I think we're afraid of death, and there's no reason to be. So as long as you're a decent person, I mean, I don't know about people that are like doing really terrible things. They may have some answering to do. But, I have a feeling your audience is a very decent, good group of people who are just trying to do good things, right? So they sort of they connect to me in a way, energetically, spiritually. I'm not sure how to explain it because I don't have human words, but we're connecting, and it felt like they were downloading me, and we were having this moment. It was in the silence. It felt very sacred, and it lasted. It felt like a long time. Time is not linear. I know we think it is here on earth, but it's not. So it just felt like we were in that connection forever, for so long. And then when it was complete, I understood that they had given me something to bring back, but I didn't have words for it. So the way I describe it, it's like somebody handing me a box that's closed, but I can't open it. I have no idea what's in it. But like, here you go. And I was like, okay, what do I do with this? Well, I don't get to get the answers, right? So I'm just like, oh, and it wasn't a box, but it felt like, getting something that you can't open. So when that completes, I came into this state of realizing we're all one. All identity of who I thought I was just disappeared. And I realized I'm not Mariko. I was never a rock climber. I was never practicing alternative medicine. I don't like pizza. Like anything that I thought, all the personality things that we think we are, are gone. And the only thing I knew was that I am love, bliss, joy, and peace. I am one with all beings. We are all one. There is no one else. We are one. We are love. And just being in that state and then feeling like, again, wrong words, but feeling like I'm standing and watching the universe and experiencing this joy, this peace, this love, my true nature, who I really am. I'm experiencing this. And people have asked like, how long? And I'm like, 800 years. I don't know. Like it wasn't, I, I'm sure I wasn't breathing and my heart had stopped for a short period of time because otherwise I wouldn't have been back. Right. But because I was experiencing infinite reality, I'm experiencing infinite time, which is the only time. So it felt like I was standing, watching the universe, experiencing myself as love, bliss, joy, and peace for like, 800 years or more. So by then, all of me is gone, all Mariko, all sense of who I am is gone because I am only love now. I am only bliss. And I'm still separate, right? Because me and bliss. So I'm not in oneness consciousness, but I'm experiencing myself as, oh, I am bliss. And then all of a sudden, I want to say here, but it wasn't so much of a here. It's through what I call thought waves of how it was communicated. But a voice was there saying, it's not your time. You have to go back. And so I replied, no, no, I'm good. I'm experiencing oneness and in the universe. And you want me to go back? So I said, and then again, it's not your time. You have to go back and help people. Remember who you are. Go back and help them. To which I didn't say no, but I was like resistance. And then again, go back and help people. Remember who you are. And in that moment, it wasn't just remember who you are, go back and help them. It was a message that everybody has a time that they can go. And they said, it's not your time. Go back and help them. Remember who you are. Go back and help them. People are allowed to go. They can go at their time. They can't go before or after. And this is not your time. Go back and help them. So in that moment, I realized, oh, that there's still someone to go back to. I'm not ashen. I'm not like in the grave. Like, okay, I guess this is not as long as I thought. But the other thought was go back and be who? Ooh, go back and be what? But all I wanted to do was say yes, because I understood that I had an assignment on my soul. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I remember it was funny because they're like, go back. So I was like, okay. Like nothing's happening. And so I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get back in my body. I can't get back in my body. And at that moment, it was like instant. I felt like I was being hurled through space, like somebody was pushing me from behind. And then I took a breath and I was in raking intense pain. And it was the most excruciating thing I've ever experienced in my life. And interesting in that moment, my first thought, of course, was I have to go to the hospital, right? The nurse in me is like, get to the hospital. This is something happened. And in that moment, they kind of brought me back into the bliss. I didn't go back to like death, but they brought me back into like the love. And they said, don't use Western medicine, just a whisper. And it was a message of, I think the experience wasn't about, hey, you got hurt, now you got to get better. It was, you're having a whole experience and maybe Western medicine will disrupt some of the light codes, the things that we did. I didn't understand that at the time, but I knew it to be true. And I felt like my life depended on living what they told me to do. Like I was really like, okay, not comfortable, didn't feel safe, but it also did listening to them. So I took that with me. I came back and my husband was kind of trying to wake me up. He had just found me unconscious. So he's kind of, you shake somebody, you kind of tap me, kind of waking, not starting CPR right away, but waking me up, calling my name. And I took a breath again. And he said, where'd you go? And I said, I died. And we were just in this bubble of like sacred bliss. I don't know how to explain it, but I couldn't move. I was exhausted. There was no energy in my body. And from there, I told him what happened. And it was really difficult. I think dying, taking my last breath, as I told you kind of humorously, like, wow, breathing's so overrated. That part was easy. Coming back was the hard part. Coming back and having to be somebody when I was like, I don't know who that is anymore. I mean, of course I knew, but like, I didn't know how to be her. My attachments, who I thought I was, my goals. gone. It didn't matter. I was just like still in the bliss, but I still had a loss of identity and I'm back in my human. And it was really difficult because I was also very sick and I kept getting sicker because I had Lyme disease and no one knew it for 3.5 years. So eventually, this is how the universe works, which I think is kind of cool and funny. I go to the doctor 5 weeks later because really scary things are happening in my body and to my body. And I'm like, is there permanent damage? Like, I need to know. I'm not worried I'm going to die because they wouldn't let me. So, like, we're good there. But what is happening? We don't know a lot of people. But my husband had met somebody who had just moved into town too. He was setting up a new practice. I go see him, tell him what happened. I'm thinking he's going to think I'm crazy. He had had a near death experience 8 years prior and knew exactly what I was talking about and had been almost searching for someone to talk to. He hadn't really gotten to talk to many people. So I tell him the message of they're like, don't use Western medicine. And he's like, we're not. That I think it might hurt you. We're not going to do it. He's like, I'll do some tests. We talked. He gave me his opinion of what happened. And from there, it was just a matter of taking the next decade, which is how long it took, to get my life and my energy back. And I wouldn't even say I got all of my energy back. I was just able to do things part-time without being completely drained. So the near death wasn't this easy, joyful experience. Yay, you left and you got to come back and see what was on the other side and bring back a message. I mean, it was kind of traumatic. It was hard. It was lonely. It was confusing. It was a complete loss of who I am. And now I had to go be me again. And then how do I move forward when I don't even know who I am? How do I do this when I can't remember everything either. My memory, that was later, but the line went to my brain and I started having mini strokes and I was losing memory too. So it was hard.
You tell your story so eloquently and thoroughly. It's like I'm walking through it with you. One of the things I found so comforting was that you said you can't go before or after your time. So it's
Yeah.
almost like, we don't understand a lot of times when a loved one leaves. We feel like it's unfair, but you're saying it was their time and that was how
It's
it was meant to be.
generally, yeah, I mean, something I don't talk about a lot because I'm really careful about this is what they showed me was almost like a door. That you really have a door, metaphorical door. This is your time, you get a door. Go through it. This is your time. You're done, right? Exit only door. I did not have a door. They also showed me that some people have what looks like windows. I'm careful not to talk about this because we want to stay as long as we can because we're here to do something. The longer we're here, the more we work through stuff, right? Like I got to be mean and then I got to make it up, right? Kind of like clearing that up. We're here to learn how to come back into our soul. We're not here just to learn lessons and get slammed all the time. We are here to remember who we are as the soul. We want to be here for long enough to do that. The reason I'm careful to talk about the windows is because of the suicide rate and people thinking, oh, I'll leave that way. Please don't. There's more. So I did see that sometimes people kind of leave through the window. It's not their optimal time, but they can go. And I know, I think we live long enough when we have friends that have chosen. And I know I think about one in particular every day and I still get mad at her. Like, why did you go? So it's a hard thing. And so I'm really careful not to get into that because I don't want people thinking they have permission. Like, oh, cool, I'll just leave that way. Like you do want to stay as long as you can.
Living on Earth is a beautiful
Oh, yeah.
experience. I've heard so many near-death experiences, and there's no other place like this. And it's the place of great learning, and we understand more about what we would call difficulties, which are not really difficulties. We understand more about those when we're on the other side. And when you can step back and look at it like that, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. So I'm right there with you and saying, stay here as long as you can because you want to get as much as possible out of this experience.
You
Take
want to get things done too.
Yes,
Just
yes.
getting something out of it. Like you're here to get things done. And the thing you're here to get done, incarnate, is to remember who you are as the soul while in a physical body. That's the enlightenment. That's the only thing. Self-realization, enlightenment. So here's the thing about being conscious in between lifetimes. We don't have a physical body. I cannot tell you, this is funny, and I'm kind of skipping ahead, but in the astral realm, I remember we have emotions, we have energy, but we don't have a physical body. And so when you're dealing and working through emotions, guess which way you get to work through it? Emotionally. And I remember thinking, I wish I could just like sprain an ankle and get through this. And I couldn't. And the funny thing is, I have sprained now each ankle 15 times. So I'm like, okay, we're good. No more sprained ankles. So 30 times I sprained my ankles, which I think is kind of funny. But there's so much we can work out through our physical body, the challenges, the emotional dramas that we go through with people or circumstance or coworkers or bosses or whatever, the financial loss, you're working things out for your own ascension, not to punish you, not to teach you again and again, but to remember who you are, because pain tends to help us remember who we are. When we're going through emotional difficulties, a lot of times people come into like, oh my God, an awakening. Now, there's a point where you don't want to get wrapped up in your story, which is what causes more pain. And the ego loves it when we get wrapped up in our story, our human story, because it keeps us away from consciousness, from oneness consciousness, to remember who you are. So you want to stay out of your story, but we get a lot done here that we can't get done in other realms and other places that we incarnate. Yeah. It's like, it kind of cracks me up. It's kind of like a fish going like, I'm so dry. Does anyone have any water? Do they give lotion? Like, I am so dry. And you're like, you're a fish, you're in water, you're surrounded by water. And the fish is like, no, I'm not. Like, I really want to find some water. Do you have a drink? I'm so thirsty. Do you have a cup of water? And you're like, you're in water. That's what it's like for enlightenment. We're like, I don't remember who we are. I don't know. And it's like, we are enlightened already. The soul cannot be anything but enlightened. It cannot forget who it is. Our egos, the separateness pulls us away. But we come back into remembrance of who we are. And it's like, oh, I could never forget that. But it's sort of funny when we think of a fish swimming around in water, asking for a drink, asking if anyone knows where there's water. That's how we're acting as humans. It's a lot of things, right? I can't say it's a matter of meditation because it's not just that. In fact, for some people, it's not at all. They get there in another way. There is discipline and concentration. And I think the big thing is dedication. Dedicating your life to knowing that the main goal is not making money, getting the next job, fulfilling the next thing that you want. The main thing you're here to do, and the only thing worth doing, because it's the only accomplishment you're taking with you, is your spiritual progress. That's it. When you take your last breath, you're going to realize that nothing else matters. But the spiritual progress that you made is what you're taking with you. So work on that. And don't work on being perfect. Just work on it every day.
And you were conscious in between lives.
So I never forgot it. So it's kind of funny to say I remember, because I thought everyone was born this way. So, people talk about like, when's your first memory? And I'm like, I'm not going to answer that. Now I do, but but my first memory wasn't just as a baby. It was after it was coming home hundreds of years ago, possibly 1,000. I don't know. I can tell you what it looked like. Coming home to my 2-story stone building, coming up from the outside, wooden stairs, going to the inside. I had the downstairs too. I was a man in that life. I was successful. And I had just been told I was going to die. And I remember coming in, and I remember it like yesterday. It's interesting because it was, when I think of this building I was in, 100, not 500, 600, 1,000 years ago, we would look at it and say like, it's very basic. But I felt like I was a modern man standing in my high rise, in Manhattan. Like, I felt so modern. And standing at my big window, which I think was people with wealth had the big windows, right? And watching the guy, this is me having a pity party, watching the guy that sold vegetables, and he had a wooden cart that he pushed, and he was pushing that down this narrow street. I guess there was another building in front of me, and there was a narrow street, and everything was dirt, and he was pushing the cart. And that's what he did, was he sold vegetables, and he had 3 daughters, and he lived down and around. And I was so jealous and angry because I had this important role, right? All ego. So I'm having this important role. I was kind of an official. Like, I remember if somebody's farm burned down, I was the one that they came to, kind of like a town mayor or a town official. And I would organize everybody. It wasn't about hiring somebody to fix it. It was organizing the town to make sure that family was okay, their crops were okay, they got what they needed, their house was rebuilt. And my last project before I died was that the windmill broke. And so I arranged everybody. It was like just like moving all the parts and getting everyone on board and getting what we needed, raising, if it was money, raising what we needed to be able to fix the windmill, which the town ran on. And so I had this important job, and he was selling vegetables. And in my mind, I was like, he gets to live, the vegetable guy, and I'm going to die. And so I'm having this whole pity party. And I remember it was cold, probably October, November, cold enough to be cold, but not need a fire. Because I remember thinking I could light a fire, but I was like, no, it's not quite that cold yet. And I had a daughter. I was a single father. My wife had died. So I was really terrified of what's going to happen to my daughter. And I remember the process of death. I remember lying there and going through the experience of death in that lifetime. It was very familiar. I wasn't afraid. I fought before that. I did not want to die. I held on to my daughter. She held on to me like we had an iron grip on each other. Like if she could just hold me closer, I wouldn't die, because she was probably, I don't know. Kids were older back then at a younger age. So I would say it felt like she was 11 or 12 or 13 to today's standards, but she was probably 7 or 8 when I think of how big she was. Long blonde hair. Um, and I just remember all the details like it was yesterday. So I went through the process of death. My family was behind my sister. I had a sister in that life and friends, and they were behind me. And I knew that my daughter would go with my sister and she'd be okay. And there was enough money, everything was okay. But I didn't want to die. And I remember the process of death. And again, feeling familiar and feeling this, again, the light come at me. I wouldn't have called it the spiritual eye back then. I didn't know. And I remember the process of taking my last breath. And it was very comfortable. There wasn't any pain. I wasn't afraid in that moment. I was a little afraid. I was resistant. It was like I was young. I wasn't old. And so when I died, again, I went through a life review. And this was actually the life review that sticks with me more than any other memory, human in my human life or in between realms. This is the biggest one, is that when I died, they showed me my potential. They showed me what I could have been had I lived in alignment with my soul, had I lived the assignment on my soul, had I listened to them and listened to my intuition, which they called to me to listen to my intuition all the time, day after day, pulling me to listen to my intuition, pulling me to live and work and do everything from my soul. And my answer was an emphatic no, not going to happen. No, I work how I work in my head. I'm good at it. I'm successful. Don't mess with my mojo, right? Don't get me into like working from my we didn't even call it intuition. It was just working from the voice in my head. I'm not going to listen to the voice in my head. No. So it wasn't even safe to do that or talk about doing that, but it was my intuition. It was my guide saying, work from your soul, do this from your soul, live everything from your soul, from your intuition. I was like, no. So I want everyone to hear me when I said no several times. Here's the assignment on your soul. So when I died, they showed me my potential had I lived the assignment on my soul, what would have happened, how I would have helped people exponentially in my town. And so my response was like, put me back in. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Put me back in. I'll do it. I didn't know. And what they said back was, you can't. You're dead. It's too late. You can't go back and you'll never be that person again. So to this day, there is a fire in me around myself and getting anybody else who will listen to live in alignment with their soul, with their intuition, with the assignment on their soul. The bigger thing they're here to do, God, go do it. The obstacles you think you have when you take your last breath, that I equate it to like a 2-mile high wall by 50 feet wide, and someone's telling you to jump over it, but it's also 10 miles deep. And you're like, I can't jump over that. When you die, that 2-mile high by 50-mile wide wall, insurmountable, goes down to a 6-inch string off the floor that you just step over. There is no obstacle to the assignment on your soul. There is no obstacle to the big thing you're here to do, except for in your human head telling you that you can't. And it's not true. And I think a lot of what our ego's here to do is to prevent us going into oneness consciousness, right? So the ego is like working overtime of pulling us away from soul alignment. So we can't listen to that. So that from there, I stayed, I watched my daughter, I wouldn't leave until she started living her life. Then I realized it was time for me to go live mine, because I felt like my guides or somebody kept coming, because I wouldn't leave this in-between place. I wouldn't leave the limbo. I would just watch her day after day. And she was crying and she needed me. And I was just desperate to get back into my body, get back into that life. And there was no body. I was gone. And I knew I couldn't go back, but it didn't matter. If I could stay and watch her, that was something. And then eventually she let me go. She started to become happy again. She moved through the grieving process. And in that moment, it was like, okay, she's living, I can go live too. And then I moved on to the astral realm. And the astral realm is a beautiful world made of light. Everything is made of light. The grass, the trees, your body, everything's light. And then I went into a higher realm called the Causal realm. So it's a long story. I wrote about it in my book, but it's not that long actually, but The astral realm is where I go now for astral therapy, and I bring people there because everybody goes there after they leave. And so everybody, when I describe the astral realm and they can go, they're like, I don't know how I did that, but we went and that was real. I'm like, yeah, because you remember it. And from there, I decondition human limiting beliefs. I get them aligned with what they're here to do. Um, that's the work I do now. A big question I get is, do we see our loved ones? Yes. Oh my gosh, there's like a party, there's a celebration. You're going to see everybody that you ever knew in this life and past lives. It's the coolest thing. So the first thing when I got there, though, like I couldn't see, everything was white. And then I realized I had to open my spiritual eye. And it was really natural. It's not like we had that term back then. I just knew, like, oh, this thing opened and then everything came alive. So that was kind of fun. I saw all of my family, starting from the person closest to me, which again, in that life, I was a man. So it was my wife that came first. And then after that, other people that I'd been close to in that life, and then other lives. And those are people that were in the astral and they weren't incarnating in that moment. So they were there. And it was like such a like, oh my gosh, good to see you. It's been a few lifetimes. How have you been? One guy came up to me. We're not male or female, but you can be in a male or female body, kind of whatever you want. And so when I got there, I was a man. By the time I left the astral, I was more in a female body, which is interesting. I never thought of that, incarnated female. But it was very like, so good to see you. And one guy, I remember laughing. We're still a bit human there, even though we're not in human bodies. But I was like, you were famous last time, and he was like very embarrassed because fame does not matter. And he was like, yeah, I know. But it was like, he wasn't famous like a rock star. He was like the king or something, because we're going back so far. We didn't have that. But it was like, that was and we're telepathic. So we're actually not speaking in sound. But that was what we were communicating. It was really fun. There was people that I didn't like so much, right? People that we were like enemies, frenemies. We were not getting along. We had big issues in other lifetimes. And for those people that you're having horrible issues with, the people that are giving you the hardest time, the people that are narcissistic, the people that are abusing you, the people that you're like, how are they even in my life? When you see those people on the other side, there is only understanding and respect. Thank you. We did it. I understand. We're not BFFs. We're not hanging out. But there is like a gratitude of like, okay, thank you. You stay over there, but thank you. Right? There's no hugs. There's no like, there is this deep respect. So we have to remember that when we come across somebody who's really just toxic. There's some reason you're going through this. You're learning something there too. You don't have to stay in their life, but there's a reason. So I think that was also, and you see your animals that you've had in the past too. It's another question I get a lot. Am I going to see my animals?
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful experience. We've all been there. So it's just a matter of remembering. But even then, you're separate, right? I'm talking very human. You see your loved ones, you get to experience it. You're still not in oneness consciousness. This is not the highest realm. There are several realms. This is the one most of us go to after we leave this world. From there, when you're there, you don't want to just be like waiting to incarnate again. You want to be working on spiritual elevation. You want to be elevating your consciousness. And I did both. I got involved with like community and kind of having a life. And then I realized wrong move. And I went back into meditation. I lived in this meadow. I stayed in this meadow all the time. Everything was nature. There was no buildings where I was. And I elevated my consciousness to the point where there was sort of a celebration. And I got to go on to an even higher realm called the Causal realm. And from there, I got the experience because I wanted the higher teachings, because I saw that we could go into enlightenment in one lifetime. We could reach enlightenment. Doesn't happen a lot here on earth, but it does happen. And I realized that was the only desire worth having. So I was like screaming out, and I have no physical body at this point. I'm just a light. There is no physical world in the causal realm. The causal realm, for those of you who don't know, it is a world of thought and idea. It's where our thoughts originate. Where are you manifesting from? Where are you creating this thought? The causal realm. So that's where I was, where thoughts originate. I wanted oneness consciousness. It was the only thing worth having. So screaming, not with a voice, but screaming out, I want the higher teachings. And so to do that, I went through a whole purification process, but I also got to see all of my lifetimes in every life. And I got to go through a big, long life review. And then at the end of that life review, I'm and the life review and then the purification process. And then eventually I went into oneness consciousness, and I was soaring in the infinite ocean of God's oneness and just this infinite band of love. And I was one with that, and experiencing other universes, experiencing the whole universe, experiencing everything. And then eventually I came into feeling like, oh, I feel so much love. There's so much love. I remember feeling and thinking there's so much love and feeling it in my heart. And then I realized I have a heart, I have a body, I'm back. I was like, oh, and then here I am, Mariko. And that was me as a baby. So I've always remembered all of that. And I didn't know until I was 19. And this guy started talking about the place with all the lights where we are before we get here and how we can travel and the things that we do in the higher realms. And he was like, what people don't know what you're talking, like people don't talk about that. I had a total crush on this guy too. So I was like 19-year-old self was like, oh, well, I better not talk about that. I don't want to be weird. So that was like a funny moment where I kind of shut down, and I was like, I didn't know, but it made a lot of sense. I was like, that's why people don't talk about it. They don't remember. But I had no idea up until I was 19. I thought we were just weren't supposed to. But this person, he was like, it's no wonder I had a crush on him, right? He was like radiating. He had this bright white light around him all the time. He was a higher realm being, didn't know it. So I think I'm talking to somebody from the higher realms, like, what's up? Remember me? No, he didn't. But still, there are higher realm beings here to do something bigger to help elevate humanity, but they forgot who they are. So I love helping them remember who they are, what they're here to do, and step into that frequency of their higher realm self and not just the human. Because when we live and act from the human, we only get so much, even the human gifts, like there's more gifts that you can have from the higher realms. So I love doing all of that with people. You got to keep it simple. Like everyone's overstressing and overpressuring themselves, and you're not. Keep it simple. Don't worry about what you're here to do and the money and the career. I love helping people get in alignment and not live parallel to their purpose, but have their purpose be how they create income. I love that. I love that for me. I love it for everybody else. But none of that matters. It all disappears when you take your last breath. So don't overthink it. Remember who you are as the soul. That's your only soul assignment. When we talk about soul assignments, that's it. If you do that, you win. Don't focus so much on the worldly stuff because it's gone when you take your last breath, and you will wish you would have spent more time tuning into your soul. However that works for you. It doesn't have to be meditation. For some people, it's getting out in nature, it's walking, it's hiking, it's surfing, it's cycling. Like there's ways that people come into bliss, and it doesn't have to be sitting quietly in a room. I recommend. I've done it for years. I've never missed a day, and I don't even know how long, 35 or I don't know, 16, 17 years. I've not missed a day, which is a long time. So it's important, but the first thing really is concentration. And if you're at the beginning stage, you don't have to sit with your eyes closed and let your mind just like do a grocery list. One of the things I love is just sitting quietly. I don't care if it's 1 minute, and asking, who am I? Quietly, who am I? Because eventually your soul answers back. So just if there's any practice that I suggest, it's just asking yourself, who am I? And you'll feel who you are. You'll experience your soul, your intuition. You want to wake up your intuition? Ask, who am I? And it will wake up. And it's powerful and it's simple and it works. And don't pressure yourself, because that's all you're here to do is be who you are.
And who doesn't have 1 minute to sit and do that? So that's a great tip to become awakened. I love that.
The truth is always simple. We overcomplicate things, but the truth is so simple. And I think once you realize, oh, this is who I am, this vibration, this frequency, this feeling, now what do you want to do with that? Because the way I put it is your purpose is a frequency. It's not a thing you're doing. It's a frequency. So once you feel that frequency, what do you want to do with that frequency? How do you want to serve the world? How do you want to express that frequency, the greatest version of you? How could you do that?
You have lived this spiritual lifetime. You have many gifts, many blessings. You had this near-death experience. You also developed a way of healing that takes place that's not even on earth. You heal people on another level on the astral realm, and you call this astral therapy. Tell me about this astral therapy.
Thank you. Yeah. So astral therapy is my creation. It's my new modality that I birthed into the world. And it's based on my experience of being in the astral realm and staying conscious between lifetimes. So I really took for granted. I thought everyone did. I didn't know. So once I realized that, I've been a healer. I've been doing this for a long time. I started in my healing practice when I was right before I turned 24. I was 23, turning 24. So I've been doing this a really long time. And I always could access the higher realms. Even when I was doing Chinese medicine, like, how was I so intuitive? How was I getting like, well, I'm working from the higher realms. I didn't know that wasn't normal. And so as I got older and went through my own health crisis, and again, the message, remember who you are, go back and help people. That was not just about remembering who you are as a soul. It was like, Mariko, tell your story. And I was like, no. So they're going to think I'm crazy. So again, there was a lot of resistance with me. This is not getting where I am now. Like, this took, a long time. This was not easy. This was not fun. I resisted. I didn't want to do that. I was like, I'll tell any story but that one. And I knew that was what I was here to do. So again, your purpose is the most obvious thing about you. Even if it's the thing you're resisting, it's the story you don't want to tell, it's the thing you don't want to do. It's probably what you're here to do and share with the world. At least it was in my case and a lot of people I know. So I created a way of bringing people up with me through what we would consider a visualization. But when people do it, they're like, oh my gosh, that actually happened. Like, and it's interesting because when I'm there, whether I do a lot of group stuff, I have a membership where people can experience it, and I'm experiencing what you're experiencing. I see what you're saying. You don't have to tell me. I'll tell you what you're saying. Like, I'm there. So when we're dialoguing and they're like, how did you know that? Yes, our bodies are here. Our physical bodies are on earth, but I'm able to take people up into the higher realms. It's a very safe thing to do because lower realm beings cannot access the higher realms. So I love it. So I don't have to worry about that energy. So we go into the higher realms and we decondition whatever limiting belief they have. We go into other lifetimes. We go into past lives, future lives, because time's not real. We go into different dimensions. There are multiple dimensions. So sometimes something happened in a different dimension and we got to go clear that. Sometimes it's this life and you've got to clear a trauma from this life. And sometimes it's not about clearing a trauma. It's about seeing who you are and stepping into that version of your higher self. So I use it for all different reasons, depending on what people need. I have a membership where people can jump in and experience it. You can get it for free though. I have a free astral therapy on my website to find your purpose and clear what's blocking you. It's a very basic level astral therapy. I go a lot deeper in other things, but it's a way for you to experience some of it. It's been very profound healing, very profound. I almost hate to call it just healing because it is experiencing yourself as the higher realm being you are, clearing what's blocking you from showing up that way, and then getting clear on what you're doing so that you're in action. So it's not really just healing. It's like, it is remembering who you are and going back and doing something about it. You go back and help people. You remember who you are and you go back and help them, right? It's that same message they gave me. And I have a way to share that so that you can do the same thing. Because it's time to up level. Like humanity, we're shifting. Things are changing. And it's not just a few people. The masses are being called. There's more light being called up. And that's why people are listening to your podcast. Whereas 10 years ago, they wouldn't have been interested 20 years ago. And now people are awakening. There is a mass awakening. And it's like, okay, if you're being called for something more, get on board. Stop resisting. I'll tell you, it's not a smart move. You know,
I think everybody does a little bit at first, but you're right. Something's happening. There is a great awakening. And if my audience wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to partake in some of your astral therapy, how can they find you?
I have a website. So they can go to Soul Priority, that's SOUL, soulpriority.com. I have a YouTube channel, Mariko Frederick TV. I've got Instagram at Mariko Frederick. We can put the links in there because my name's not the easiest to spell. But my website, you can find some of the freebies I have. I have a private Facebook group where I'm a lot more active in there, as well as YouTube, going live on YouTube. So you can catch some of my free stuff there. And that's probably the best way to stay in touch.
And if you had one message that you'd like the audience to take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
Let me just feel into everybody. Let go of the confusion. I think a lot of you are in your heads, you're overthinking, and that's stopping you. The answer is so simple. Take in a breath, exhale. Who am I? Keep it simple. You guys are overthinking it. And I think a lot of it is also, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, but like do I don't care if it's 1 day or 2 days or a month, do some sort of detox as far as cleansing what you're watching, right? Like a sensory cleanse, like turn the TV, Netflix off, turn your computer off, turn your phone off. I don't care if it's 1 day or half a day, like get rid of all the noise, tune in. Who am I, right? Asking yourself, who am I? Who am I? Again and again, just for a minute, and then go on a walk. And then again, who am I? There's so many people listening who it's like you have this seed in you. You have this light in you, and there's a lot of the density of the world kind of around you. And it's like, break through that density, clear that stuff off. Go get one of my light healings. I have it on YouTube where I'm clearing off that density on you. Go do one of those. They're free. Just find it on my YouTube channel. And because you guys are almost on the precipice of something really big, and you're letting the density of the world keep you acting too human. It's time to stop acting so human, start acting like the higher realm being, the light being you are. Give yourself permission to be that. Act according to who you truly are, not who you've been conditioned or taught that you're allowed to be. Start getting in tune with all of us who are here elevating in whatever way we can. You want to surround yourself with those people as well. So whether you're just tuning into this podcast to find your tribe or whatever that is, do more of that, because it's go time, you guys. It's go time. This is not sit and watch a podcast and hang out and be entertained time. This is seriously like you're being called into your next level, and all the resources are going to be at your disposal.
Powerful. That was a strong message. Thank you, Mariko. This has been amazing. I've enjoyed this very much.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you, Tia. I really appreciate just like getting to connect with you and your audience and the conversations we'd have. And I wish you the best. I think that what you're doing is like so necessary. So thank you for showing up how you show up too, because it gives me a platform, other people like me, but it also just brings us together. So thank you for that.